Today's guest is Coach John, our head assistant coach at LVLTN, with a background in actuarial science and a passion for evidence-based fitness. John helps many of our clients, all the way from younger athletes to seniors and maybe even the menopausal crowd, achieve sustainable results without extreme diets or workouts. He's here to share how understanding key principles can empower anyone to transform how they look, feel, and function. Let's dive in.
Who was the comedian who just launched a big show on Netflix? He was talking about for like his entire life, he thought actuarians were people who watch birds. So he's like, what kind of bird is that? Like, I don't know.
Forget
like,
his name. I literally just watched it over Christmas.
Nate something, right?
Nate Bargatze, that guy?
Yeah.
It's
a pretty good one.
What is it? What does one actually do?
So, an actuary works for an insurance company in most cases, sometimes consulting firms, but in most cases what they're doing is they are taking the probability that somebody is either going to get sick or die, and they're implementing that into some type of modeling for insurance premiums. So health insurance, life insurance, and I did do all of these. The other consulting area is working for businesses to help set or plan for pensions or retirement plans for their employees. So making sure a company has enough money to pay out benefits at the end of somebody's career or whatnot. So it's a lot of data analytics and predictive modeling essentially. So that's been my background ever since college essentially, and I think I still use a good bit of that today. A lot of what we do, as coaches is data driven for sure, but it is certainly a lot different than sitting at a computer screen plugging these numbers into these modeling softwares. It was not for me, for sure.
That has nothing to do with birds.
No, not even.
John, I'm asking because I genuinely don't know this. Was there an aha moment for you where you were like, I can't do this anymore?
Yes, but it honestly doesn't really have anything to do with the actual field, the career as a whole. I really, really liked my first job. I was in Philadelphia working for a life insurance company, and the people were great. The company was great. I could see myself still being there to this day if I didn't have to move home, but I chose to move home after the condo building that I was renting at that time. There was a fire, and it didn't burn all the way down, but I had to move out. The guy above me actually didn't survive. So it's kind of like this big thing. And I was like fresh out of college. I hadn't even been there a year. Found a new apartment, but then eventually was like, I don't like this apartment. Ended up coming home. So when I got a new job in Pittsburgh, that role was horrible, terrible. It was like a new position. So I didn't really have a manager who gave me work to do. So I spent the majority of my days walking around the city of Pittsburgh, and I hope nobody from this company
ever hears
listens to this. Yeah. But I didn't do anything. I walked around the city of Pittsburgh for 5 hours a day and was just so bored that I couldn't do it anymore. I had one more role after that, but that one was the complete opposite, where I was like, I'm so busy. I'm in the office for 15 hours a day. I'm taking the bus into the city. I basically had 30 minutes of me time a day, legitimately. And so I was like, I can't do this anymore. So it was mostly kind of the specific jobs that I had, not the career itself.
So if you had 5 hours a day, then you obviously had some time to put into that bodybuilding career.
That's honestly where it started. So in addition to walking around the city, when I was at my desk, I was on YouTube. And that's when I first started. I got introduced to Christian Guzman on YouTube, Max Tuning, people like that. And that's when I started seeing people do competitions. I first saw men's physique, and I'm not a big person, never have been. I always knew I was never going to be a bodybuilder, but I was like, hey, I can compete, I can do that. And it was in one of those YouTube binges basically that I decided I'm going to get into fitness in some way, shape, or form. And it started with I'm doing a competition this year. So yeah, it was a weird way of getting there, but that's what started it, certainly.
I feel like that's when YouTube was just popping though. Like everybody was watching YouTube vlogs and like that was the thing
like
to
2014,
do.
2015.
Yeah.
The flexible dieting era.
Right. If it fits your macros, it was just like, and that was super
Matt
intriguing to me
Ogus
because
on
it's, yeah,
YouTube.
exactly. It's like, it was the numbers aspect with like, oh, I can get shredded and eat, Pop-Tarts or whatever. So,
You're like, okay, I'm
definitely
intrigued.
utilized a little bit of that. Yeah, it was like, I put two and two together. So that's where it all started. Hi, Mark.
That's wild.
Actuarial analyst becomes physique competitor.
But I feel
How
like
many-
it does. Go ahead, Alessandra.
I was just going to say, how many actual competitions did you do?
I don't know. I've got a good bit of the hardware back there from, some of those are one of them's from my first competition, and some of them are from my actual last competing season, which was 2019. So first one, 2016, and then probably like 10 total, half of them being quote unquote professional shows because I ended up getting a pro card in a couple of the natural organizations, which just means you have to take a polygraph to say I don't take any anabolic steroids or whatever. And then in a few of them, like the ones that I won, because I won a couple of shows, you have to actually take a urine analysis test after the fact. So there's a couple of first place trophies back there, a couple of not so great ones. But yeah, I did it for three.
A trophy's
years,
a
I would
trophy,
say.
John.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
A participation
but yeah,
trophy, if you will.
since. Been a couple of years now.
I feel like you were gonna do a show.
No, I did. You're thinking of 2022. I did one off one, kind of randomly.
Oh,
and it
okay.
didn't
Because I'm
go
like, I
well.
swear you prepped for a show while you were still, while you were working here. So when you said 2019, I'm like, wasn't there
Yeah.
another one after that?
There was. I just it didn't go well. I thought I looked good, but I
you don't
placed
count that
last.
one.
So yeah, we're gonna pretend like it didn't happen.
I have a question on those polygraph tests. Do you ever get on stage and you're like, that person? I don't know how they got past the polygraph, but they're definitely not natty. Have you ever had that?
I mean, at this point, I've seen so many people on like the world stage, the big ones, that I have shifted to like I believe people now. There's some insanely huge people
Natural.
out there naturally. It like makes no sense to you, but the more and more you see it, you're kind of like, I'm not just going to assume that they're lying, because there's some freaks of nature out there in the coolest way possible, truly.
Yeah,
But,
just some freak genetics.
Yeah.
And a
Is
lot of
Mike
hard
O'Hearn
work.
one of them?
No way.
I don't. He will never hear this, but no, he's not. He's not natural. No way.
No way.
Does he claim to be?
Yeah.
I think he still does. Yeah. There's all kinds of people like YouTubers and whatnot who still go to convention or like expos and try and get him to just step on a scale, because he's always lying about how much, or they say he's lying anyway, but how much he weighs naturally, and he's so lean. Like nobody's 250 pounds shredded,
Just pure
lean.
muscle.
You know what I mean?
I think he's like 260 or 270, like lean.
That's
But that's the thing. He
wild.
won't get
No
on.
way.
I've seen him like, or somebody around him like broke somebody's scale. They're like, get this out of here. He won't do it. So who knows?
interesting. Okay.
But yeah, different world. I don't even keep up with it all that much anymore. Just hasn't. Maybe it's since becoming a dad. Just doesn't intrigue me all that much anymore. I don't really have any future plans to do it again. I would do it over again, like if I could go back and do it as a younger me again. But just a different world now.
Yeah, that tends to happen.
With kids.
I mean,
yeah.
even with powerlifting, like I like to feel good in all aspects of every aspect of training and nutrition. And like when you compete, it's very all in. Like you have to be all in if you want to succeed. And when you become a parent, like we all know that time is a lot more limited. All the things we talk about regularly here on the podcast, but let's scale it back. So then you start working for Joel. How'd you guys connect? Social media?
So there was a couple of years in between when I started competing and actually left the actuarial field. So after I did my first show, I ended up getting really soon after getting certified as a personal trainer and doing kind of like off and on, group coaching in Anytime Fitness was my first role. And then I actually got hooked up with some people from my hometown who own a little gym in Butler. Pennsylvania, and they let me, kind of like shadow them and train some of their clients. And then I kind of became like their head trainer at the gym. And for like a year and a half, I did that while serving, pouring beer, bartending. And then eventually I just kind of built up my own personal roster where they let me, train there, basically just like use their gym, but like have my own clients. And that led us up to 2020, basically. So right around that time is when Joelle ended up needing more help. Level 10 was, too big for just her, and then just her and Alex at that point. So it was probably through like Alyssa.
I think it
don't
must
know
have
exactly how I like knew who you were or whatnot, but I just saw her like saying she was looking for coaches, and I ended up applying through Instagram, basically.
You might have found me through Alyssa. This was 5 years ago, so I don't recall entirely, but when we started hiring more coaches at Level 10, this is probably around like May, June, John, of 2020 that you came in.
I think it started in May, so it might have been like the month before.
Okay. Yeah. So we had launched in April, and we were immediately full rosters, Alex and I, and we were like, okay, we got to bring on some other coaches. And so I think the first thing I did was put on an Instagram slide of like looking for more coaches, hiring. I don't know if Alyssa sent that to you, or if you had already been following me.
I think it was following you already, but it had to have been through her that I found out who you were in general.
Yeah. And there's kind of like a weird tie-in there. Like Alyssa and John went to high school together. Alyssa and I went to the same college, but I wouldn't even say college together because we didn't even know each other until after we graduated. And then we're like, wait, you were there, same year, same time, like there was so much overlap and we didn't even realize. And then, there's all these weird, like Brad's wife is from Butler, and like all these weird intricacies now of like the small world of the fitness industry. Anyway, so then John came in alongside two other coaches. You guys were all kind of brought in at the same time. And business, continued to grow and scale from there. And now it's 5 years later. John's our head assistant coach of now 16 of us since the merge as Levolution now. And I'm curious about, John, has your in terms of your coaching, obviously, the range of you being here, you've gained a lot of experience. You've done different continuing ed things along the way. Do you feel like when you started versus now, your typical client or ideal client is different?
I think typical client is actually fairly similar. Ideal client has definitely shifted and changed. And I mean, the majority of the clients at first were coming from you, from Level 10 in your audience. So that's why it hasn't shifted or changed all that much over the past 5 years, because now our audiences are kind of similar, whereas at that point they weren't. I was, I think, a little bit more, or at least trying to be a little bit more niche into the like competitors and younger people who are, maybe just getting into fitness or what, people that I could see a little bit more eye to eye on with in terms of just like life experience and things like that. And that has very much shifted to, over the past 5 years, I've probably worked with 10 male clients, no, 20, I'll say 20 male clients total. It's all women, and the majority of them are like maybe the youngest on average is like 35, you know what I mean, up to somewhere around 60. And surprisingly, that has actually worked really, really well. Yeah. Maybe that's just by kind of happenstance, and it just is something I molded myself into, like in my persona, my approach, how I speak to people. I don't know, because I never thought that I was going to be that voice. I
the middle-aged menopausal mom voice.
20 years ago, I would have thought that I would have been like, coaching athletes, kids, the kind of not necessarily hard ass or tough love, but it's completely different than what I do now.
Nuance,
which is, I speak to people about their life experience that I don't actually have any real connection with, but am able to somehow find that and help people work through it, and virtually too, which even thinking back then, when I started with Level 10, I'm really glad it happened this way, but I had years of in-person experience and maybe like 3 months of online coaching experience because I had started it myself, but I had maybe 5 clients who I had worked with in person previously sign on with me. So it was very new, very fresh, and very different, you know what I mean? And I think it's invaluable to start in that position. And maybe that's what helped me be able to connect with different type of people, is I had to do that face-to-face first. And I mean, there's no other high pressure situation than that, to have to like adapt on the moment when somebody, you know, to talk to somebody, keep them engaged, keep them entertained, keep them comfortable while also working hard, while also, you know, being in line with their goals and the outcomes. Like that, to me, I would say, you know, to what makes a good online coach is being able to be a trainer or coach in person. But yeah, it's kind of wild to be where I'm at now, thinking back on it.
So 2 questions for you. One, this has been a debate. We've thrown back and forth a little bit, but I personally crave the in-person experience again. Do you miss that at all, or do you enjoy the online space as it is?
Both. I would say if I didn't have a kid now, if Alba wasn't a part of the equation, I probably would be training people in person now in some capacity, because over the past couple of years, it's certainly been one of those things. Could also just be kind of like I've been working at home full time for the past half a decade. Like I don't leave the house enough. I need to go do something. So it could have been just that. But yeah, there's something different about seeing somebody send you a clip of them doing an exercise and providing feedback. Like I love doing that, but it's better if I'm able to like correct there in the moment in person. So yeah, I really miss it, but I right now couldn't see it being even possible.
Yeah, it would be tough,
you know what
but
I mean?
the
Relatable.
community, I think it's the community aspect after COVID that the craving started to kind of trickle in after that point.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Even just the gym environment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've trained in my garage now. I don't even go to the gym to work out myself. So that aspect, you know, when I was training people in person, everybody knew who I was. Everybody knew my name. Even if they didn't, you always have that typical like, oh, I see that person 18 times a week. You're going to like give them the nod. I don't have that in my garage where it's just me, you know? So yeah, I do miss that for sure.
I
So
definitely miss
second-
that
oh,
about
sorry, go.
teaching. I definitely miss that about teaching too. Like I don't miss like the politics of the job. I don't miss like having other like administrators to answer to who I didn't necessarily jive with. Like I don't miss the administrative work that came along with teaching, but like I miss the social aspect of like being with people, having adult conversations, having conversations with teenagers, like the actual act of doing the teaching and the relationships and the social aspect of it, I definitely miss, but not enough to go back to it.
We even talked about this when we visited you, Joelle. Like me coming to the gym with you, I was like, oh, it's kind of nice, like seeing
Yeah.
people, because we're
it's
the
like
same.
5
We're in the
morning.
same
Hey,
boat.
Joelle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Something
it like
you know, we,
just
know a lot of
uplifts
people.
you. Yeah, and it's kind of nice because we don't get that here either, John. Like, yeah, there are a lot of perks of having a gym at home and having a garage gym, but you do definitely miss that social aspect, especially because we're also working from home. So like we are literally here 24/7. But yeah.
Team HQ on the vision board. But the second thing I wanted to ask you, you threw out that you've probably worked with 20 male clients during this period since you jumped on. My view on it, tell me if you agree or disagree, and I'm hoping like this, we talk about through awareness we create change. So I'm hoping if someone's husband listens to this episode, they become aware of that paradigm they're looking at this stuff through. But I feel like as a male, and even myself, like pre-coaching, I don't know how you felt, but you're kind of looking to previous competitors, like high level people who are not natural, like have achieved the highest of highs, if you're going to do it at all. So they're either seeking those out, or they're like, no, I don't need to coach at all, or they're not doing it all. So those are anything at all. So those are the 3 buckets. You're not training, you're looking for the pro, or you don't think you need help. I feel like those are the 3 main mindsets of men in a general sense. Obviously, there's still people we have worked with who are men, but I feel like that's kind of the overarching theme, overarching feel. And then, you know, we've talked about the difficulty of marketing, you know, doing things the right way. It's not sexy. And I feel like that falls on even more deaf ears when you're speaking to men about that. You got to do it the right way. You got to manage your habits, yada, 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 where a guy is looking for that extreme. No, I'm going to do this crazy program. I'm going to train 7 days a week. 2 hours a day. I'm not taking any rest days. I'm going to eat the crash diet and I'm going to change my body in, 45 seconds. I feel like that is kind of this overarching paradigm. What are your thoughts?
I agree completely. And I certainly, like, if I wanted to, if you and I wanted to, we could change the way that we speak on social media. I could very much cater to, men in that sense, in, what I'm talking about and how I say it. But it does just go against the way that I actually coach. So it almost would be like a bait and switch technique in order to, just sign more clients. But that is why it's happened that way, because a lot of, my following on social media and a lot of the leads that I ended up getting came from this period of time where I was seeing all of this misleading nonsense, bullshit on social media and calling it out and saying, they are targeting you. This person is targeting you directly, and you that I'm referring to there is middle-aged women. You know what I mean? Because they're the ones that get attacked and manipulated, and their money stolen basically by these people, by these companies and these products. And so, me saying like, hey, this cortisol cocktail is not going to solve all of your problems is not going to be heard by a 35-year-old guy, you know what I mean? Because they're not being targeted by that. And so, yeah, it's tough. And I would have to almost like duplicate myself or work double time to do both. I would need a new Instagram page to basically kind of like talk to those who aren't being, targeted by that and just are men who have gotten out of shape and want to get back into shape. I do think that there is a big audience there, though, that the first category, I think the one you said, the guys that aren't doing anything, they're not like looking for the coaches that are, the IFBB pros or whatever. They're just kind of like not interested in, or don't have those goals yet. I think that's a huge population. That's a huge demographic. But yeah, it's tougher to speak to them. Maybe honestly, they're probably not on social media as much. And if they are, they're not scrolling the health and fitness side of it, which is so small as it is. They're scrolling Instagram and TikTok for just like the funny stuff, the memes and what have you. So yeah, it's wild with, we can have all of our own perceptions about who we're talking to and what's out there, but our part of social media and the internet is so small as it is. Like, we're really not talking about the population in any way, shape, or form.
It's tough to... Go ahead, Joel.
I also think just similarly along those lines, yes, it's mostly women being targeted in terms of the misinformation, partly because the women are who have been so vulnerable to like diet culture and looking a certain way. And not that men are don't ever deal with body image issues or anything like that. Of course they can. But I feel like our average female client that comes to us is someone who is like, they're just so fed up. They're like, I've tried all the things. I've done all the stupid diets. I've done all the fad stuff. Now sustainability seems sexy to me because I haven't been able to sustain my weight loss, or I haven't been able to sustain my progress, or I haven't been, I'm start, stop. Our average male client, to that same point, first of all, I would say, and we have I would say a growing men's team. Brad and I were just talking about this the other day. We've had a lot of male clients so far this month, but I find that those male clients are rarely from social media. They're usually a referral from someone who has been with Levolution. Like it's a husband of someone, a brother of someone, an uncle, a dad of whoever of someone. And then we were a referral to them. So similarly to that point, like a lot of the content we're posting is relevant to that person, but it might not be reaching that person.
I would agree. I think even before the merge, like we would see most of our male clients would join with their wives, or like it was like a joint situation where they would come do it together. It was very rare for a guy our age to join on his own. We've had a couple, but it is very interesting to me. And I think it makes a lot of sense when you pitch it from the social media side, because guys definitely use it much differently than girls. I mean, I even think me to Josh, like we use social media differently, So I think it's definitely interesting to think about, and pondering if we ever go that route, like just to see what happens. But let's talk about your current ideal client a little bit more, because I think right now we're seeing a lot of hot topics of menopause and just women of that age range who really do struggle with weight loss. And I don't even know where I want to start here, but I would say let's start with what you have seen as like the most common struggle that they have when they start with you.
I think Joel like framed it really well. I mean, that's basically the example, like the avatar is somebody who has, for whether it be the past couple of years or the past couple of decades, been pitched, sold, deceived, or what have you, these strategies, these approaches, these products that promise they're going to be the end-all solutions, that they're going to, save you from every obstacle you've ever faced in your life. And it's just this repeated cycle over and over again of, commit to that, try it, not see anything happen, revert to old habits that then get, ingrained even deeper. A new flashy but same exact thing comes up, and it's over and over and over again until they find some voice out there that's saying, this isn't how things should be done. I'm sorry that it's happened this way, but you have been lied to all of your life for decades.
And parents lied to you.
Yeah.
Which is so
Hopefully
hard
not
too,
parents.
because I find that unlearning, teaching people how to unlearn a lot of those really ingrained thought patterns and behaviors around food and exercise is the hardest part of that coaching process. Is not even getting them to learn something new. It's like unlearning the old.
It is, but it's also the most rewarding to me. I don't think that I've, initially I would have thought that my ideal outcome for a client would be, I helped this person lose 20 pounds, or I helped this person look the way that they wanted to look. Now it's helping somebody realize that weighing a certain amount or looking a certain way was never the actual goal, that really they wanted to be happy in their lives, like be confident in their choices and not be controlled by all of these messages that became beliefs from that repeated, exposure to the misleading approaches and strategies. And it's a change that takes time, and that's part of the reward for me too, is that it doesn't happen right away. I've always been the type of person who believes that the most impactful, accomplishment that you can achieve is something that takes a long period of time. I've used like an analogy about growing out my hair plenty of times over, because to me, I'm kind of like after doing it multiple times, it's one of those things where it takes so freaking long and it sucks so freaking bad throughout the whole process, and you hate it most of the time. More days are awful than good, until you get to this point where you're like, I stuck that out for 3 years and now I'm here. Having somebody have that moment with their health and their fitness and their relationship with their body, their relationship with the scale and food, and being able to feel free in that way is like, it's unreal. It's better to me than any type of physical outcome. But it's also cool that usually they're paired together. You know what I mean? When they finally create that freedom for themselves, they find that, and now I'm losing weight. Oh, and now my pants are fitting better. Now I'm actually building the strength, and I'm doing so in a way that isn't going to just stop once these pills run out, or once I stop subscribing to the supplements every month, or what have you. Right? So I don't know. It takes time. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of repeating the same message over and over again. And maybe that's one of the things that I have found myself, at this point, being really good at, is saying the same thing in a different way, in a different tone, using a different analogy or whatever, so that at one time it's going to click. And all you need is that one time, because they've heard it a million times, but 1,000,001 might be the time, So I don't even know what the original question was.
I don't either at this point.
I think everything you said, though, kind of circled around the fact that, and this is almost, feeling like an opposite when you're talking about in-person versus online, but the ability to develop a relationship with a person through the online space, garner that trust, and actually get them to buy into something new that makes them uncomfortable. A lot of times, the most difficult client just wants you to train them the way that they've always trained. They want you to coach them the way they've always coached themselves. And then when you go and put out these foreign concepts to them, they're like, well, no, I've never done that before. I'm not comfortable doing that. And they have to buy into you and your philosophy and your coaching expertise enough to say, okay, I'm going to take a leap of faith. I'm going to jump and trust you've got my best intentions in mind, and get them to commit to that. So even after the first rocky week, the second rocky week, the third rocky week, they're still committed to that plan. And like you talked about, 3 years down the road, and they've gone through this entire transformation, they've maintained these incredible habit changes, and they've seen a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a huge aha moment. It's a skill on your end to be able to build and nurture that relationship as much as it is everything you put in, coaching tactic wise.
Yeah, I think the difference from in person is like a successful first experience. Somebody's going to walk away remembering how they felt, right? Like physically, like, was I tired? Did I feel like I got a good workout? The initial experience in relationship and rapport building in the online space and virtual, to me, is somebody walking away with the right reflections and the right questions. They walk away thinking about the right things as opposed to being given certain answers or certain protocols. I'm not telling people, I am, like, what workouts to do and how much to eat and whatnot, but really where that change happens is what I'm asking them, what I'm having them think about, like the reflections that I want them to do. And I have so much more to work with when I have decades to go back to and say, like, if I'm talking to somebody who has a grandchild now, I've got life experience that I can pull on to like have them think about versus somebody who's 20 and was basically just born. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's why it's so much easier for me to connect to those people, because I'm not just telling what to do anymore. I'm more so asking the questions that leave them thinking a certain way.
For sure. And now we want to make sure that we can give some people the actionable steps and take a ton of value from this. So when it comes to prime avatar, which again sounds like middle-aged women, what would you say are the 3 biggest hurdles that they come to you with?
Not eating enough or eating inconsistently. I guess that could kind of be lumped into the same category. Doing too much or trying to do too much total work, total exercise, workout sessions, total cardio. And then the third bucket would be, and there's a bunch of different branches to this, but would be like recovering suboptimally. So not sleeping enough, too much alcohol, too much fast food, or what have you. And all 3 of those is basically a recipe for hormonal dysregulation for anybody. But when you're talking about a 35 to 45-year-old woman, it's like you're already on the borderline of these things starting to change, things starting to get harder. These obstacles are going to come up no matter what. You can't get away from them. And then you add in not getting enough sleep, being overly stressed from work, daily alcohol consumption, and you're trying to eat 1,200 calories because of those 30 years of beliefs and not succeeding. So you're also then going from 1,200 calories to 4,000 calories on the weekends. And there's all of these things. There's just like a whirlwind of exposures that your body and your nervous system is trying to respond to and adapt to. And that reflection, that outcome is pretty suboptimal.
So if we dive into these, we'll start with the nutrition bucket. What are some things at a basic level, so someone who's just starting off, that you're addressing, the first few weeks?
I would say it's just the consistency with it. Like, can we make your Saturday look more similar to a Monday? Because there's likely a pretty substantial gap in terms of basically no carbs, nothing but protein, versus eating out 3 times a day, right? So it's, can we level or shrink that gap a little bit from a calorie perspective, from a nutrient quality perspective, because that's going to give your body a little bit more of a, homogeneous, regulated environment to start to respond to. So just consistency across the week with, I think the biggest thing is the amount of food, right? Can we just not eat so few calories these days and then so many calories these days?
Well, that is a huge point for, across the board. It seems like with a lot of women coming in who are trying to lose weight and couldn't. So how do you help them get over that fear of, bringing those calories up? Hey, I came here to lose weight. Why are we increasing calories? How do we overcome that objective?
Yeah, the initial conversation that I like to have is the data-driven one, where I will go through a basic calculation and say, be very honest and say, this is not going to be specific to you, but I just want to see where you're at in relation to this baseline, right? This assumption of where a person of your height, weight, age, or what have you, quote unquote, should be. And I'll do a very generic calculation of what's your body weight, I'll multiply it by 10, how active are you, apply a little bit of a multiplier there. And whatever that ends up coming out to be, it's pretty often that their target that they're aiming for, not that they're always hitting that, because again, the weekends tend to be higher anyway, but the target that they aim for on their good days, their Mondays or what have you, is substantially lower than that. And so seeing those figures is, I think, that like foot in the door to kind of realize like, oh, I'm doing something wrong, or this might be the like why I'm struggling and things aren't working out the way that they should be or that I want them to be.
Now, it's funny. The first two buckets you mentioned, not eating enough or inconsistency with nutrition, and then the next one is overworking, doing too much when it comes to training, overall volume.
Yeah, and I mean, they go hand in hand because I'm also a believer. So I'm a believer, clearly, that one of the biggest problems, like I just said, is that people try to do too much exercise. There's too much work. They're overloading their system. I also am a believer that it's pretty much impossible to overtrain for most people, at least the people that we're going to be working with, general population people. Sure, if we're talking about like Olympic athletes or like true competitors of really intense sports, they can probably overtrain and see some really, detrimental impacts. But if we're talking about just a random person off the street, there's no way that they're going to work out too hard if they're eating enough food. So it always almost comes back to like you're doing too much exercise for the amount of nutrient intake that you're giving your body. So they go hand in hand. But yeah, it tends to be a really drastic, like 180, or it doesn't make sense when you think about it logically. You're eating 1,200 calories or trying to, and you're trying to do an hour of cardio those days while also doing Orange Theory 5 days out of the week. Like that's a lot of expenditure. It's a major deficit that you're creating. It's no wonder you can't adhere to it. Your body's going to fight back.
So for the person whose mind is spinning right now, saying I am under eating and I am overtraining, but I'm not losing weight, what is happening in that scenario?
I mean, in most cases, again, this is coming from the data-driven person that I am, it's going to be at the end of the day, whether we're talking about within a day, a week, a month, or even over the course of the year, you end up consuming way more than you think that you are because you're trying to eat too little and because you're trying to move too much. And whether that be from the binges on the weekend, whether that be from the liquid calories that you're not even thinking about because they're just fluid going down, whether that be from, parties that you go to and you're kind of like, oh, this is just one of those days, I'll get back to it Monday. Those can add up, and they can be the magnitude of like those, I'm just not going to track that or we're not going to count that day, can very easily supersede the deficit days, even though those can be pretty drastic. Like, yeah, you might be able to create a 800 calorie deficit on one day, but you know how easy it is to eat in a 1,600 calorie surplus the next day? Like really easy, and so that's one example. One day, there's 365 days in a year. So over time, it's kind of like the math ends up adding up if you zoom out far enough. And again, the people that I'm usually working with, I'm talking about not just 365 days, but decades, you know what I mean? 3,600 days. So yeah, it's an eye-opening conversation. It's not supposed to like make people feel guilty. It's not anybody's fault, really. They've been led down a path that they didn't really know that they were choosing.
I feel like it also almost ties into the reverse diet conversation, John, where we see, and you and I podcasted about this a long time ago, like the actual reverse dieting and what that means and what's likely happening, because for a long time it was really popular on social media to show people like eating more and losing weight. And that came with a lot of questions about like, well, how is that person eating so much and they're losing weight? And a lot of times it comes down to the original person who, someone might be working with now or getting coached, misreporting, usually subconsciously, misreporting or underestimating how much they're actually consuming. And so you might see an instance where someone says, yeah, I'm eating 1,200 calories, I'm eating 1,200 calories, I'm eating 1,200 calories. And like John said, there's this discrepancy between like Okay, well, when you're trying to be quote unquote good, you might be eating 1,200 calories, but then the weekend comes and then you're eating fast food and lots of ultra processed food and you're going out to eat and you're slugging alcohol and whatever else. You're likely not actually eating 1,200 calories on a weekly basis, at a weekly average. And so you take someone like that and you say, okay, we're going to put you in at 1,600 calories. But now they're consuming 1,600 calories every day. Well, now they're losing weight. And on paper, you're like, oh, they came to me eating 1,200 calories. Now they're eating 1,600. They're losing weight, eating more. But what's more likely is they were probably averaging 2,000 calories, not being super consistent with that 1,200 because it was nearly impossible to stay consistent with. And now we actually have them in a consistent deficit at that, quote, 1,600 calories. And now they're losing weight. And I feel like that's something that very commonly happens, and the client feels like they're eating more, but we're actually just sustaining more consistency within that caloric amount.
Yeah, and within that reality, one of my favorite things that happens is this unraveling of the dichotomy between like good versus bad, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a conversation I have very often because, again, this is my client, that up until this point, there has been a deep-rooted belief that I will not lose weight unless I eliminate this completely. I don't have this. I have this bad list of food, and I don't even think about it. And one of the tough love things that I will do, and I love doing this because it makes people uncomfortable, but in the best way after the fact, is I will say, I need you to have an exposure to one of those bad food list items every single day. I don't care if it's one bite, one serving, an entire meal. I need you to have one. And when that can happen, paired with exactly what you just talked about, Joelle, eating more food, or rather less, but consistently, with an increased nutrient quality as a whole. Because even if you're having an exposure to those bad foods, that one treat every single day, if 90% of your diet otherwise is filled with lots of fruits, veggies, grains, fiber, so on and so forth, you're going to feel better, you're going to look better, scale's likely going to come down, and you're going to say, holy shit, I did that while eating whatever, that piece of bread, that bagel. Like, sometimes it's the most simplest things in terms of carbs or sugar rice or what have you. And it's so cool to me to have somebody really kind of like get it, have that aha moment, which is, takes me back to when I first learned about the whole if it fits your macros. Like, it was so cool to me for that, when that was new. The first time you learned that, right? It was like, really, I can lose weight if I
eat Pop-Tarts,
modify the numbers correctly. It's a cool thing to learn that for the first time, especially after being told the opposite for 15 years,
Yeah, that concept alone, I would give credit to single-handedly pulling me out of an eating disorder once I learned that, because it completely shifted my relationship with food when I no longer saw specific foods as fattening.
And then your whole life is different after that, right?
Yeah.
And that happened to you when you were, what, 25?
Yeah, even younger, 19, 20.
You obviously have had and still have like an entire lifetime ahead of you after that. I think one of the things that people don't realize is that if you're 40, 50, or 60, you also have an entire lifetime ahead of you from that point on as well. So these, revelations and these lifestyle and behavior changes can truly change the trajectory of the rest of your life, even if they don't look the way that you originally thought. Because a lot of people do come to us to me with the goal of, I want to get back to the body that I was in when I was 25. I used to weigh 135. That's my goal. I'm going to be happy when I get there again. I never promise anybody that they're going to get there again. And eventually I end up having them reflect on, what if you don't? What if you never weigh 135 again? What if you're never that size again? So what?
Yeah, what does that mean for you?
Right? Okay, you're never going to be 135 pounds again, but you can get up and down off the ground now without using your hands and pick up your grandchild while you're doing it. You can go out to eat with your family when they want to go after church, and you don't have to be limited to where you go or what you can eat because you've learned the nutritional composition of foods, right? You can take pictures with your loved ones and not make them delete it right away, or smile in it, right? Like, look ahead at what your life can look like, not dictate your success by what it used to be. And they're really challenging places to get to with people, but it's really, really cool also.
No doubt. Now, John, your third bucket was stress and recovery. What are the big things you're throwing into that one?
So, sleep. The hardest one to me, sleep is easy. Reducing alcohol is, I will say, easy to talk about and to bring awareness about. It's not always the easiest thing to have people actually adopt and change, but it's a very simple, obvious one. Most people understand it, so that's easy to talk about. Sleep is easy to talk about. The toughest one is going to be just work stress as a whole, because most people, 99% of the world, don't have the luxury of just quitting their job. If you don't like being an actuary, go be an online health and fitness coach. It's not just possible to turn that off. So instead of how do I stop having a stressful life, it's how do I better manage it? And I would say that that's where a lot of the most eye-opening things can come up as well, in terms of what people can do differently, how they can reallocate their time, because it can be as small as I'm just going to be on my phone for 20 minutes less per day, because this scrolling puts me in this negative headspace every single day, right before I go to sleep or right before I wake up. So it could be as simple as that, or it could be, well, let's adopt a more specific routine into your weekly regimen, where you're now also going somewhere to speak to someone. Maybe it's therapy, maybe it's just therapeutic, like it's a massage or a spa day or things like that, but managing stress as a whole, because that's where the whole cortisol is the devil people have something, right? It's rooted in reality. There's legitimacy in terms of stress being detrimental and it making it more difficult to lose weight, to feel good and whatnot. And so it's how do we manage that in a way that's realistic? So arguably, I would say that, and kind of having people's dietary behavior changes are kind of the top two, because these types of people that we're working with already have that discipline, that desire. They're the type of people who want to work and work out, so they're going to do that. They're going to put the effort in there. It's, can we get the dietary habit changes, and can we make life a little bit less stressful in meaningful ways?
So there you have it, guys. Coach John will train your mom. You've heard how he's going to do it. Sign her ass up.
And your grandma.
Anything else you want the people to know, John? About you, life,
if
how you
you're a
coach?
man, I will still work with you. And so will anybody else at LVLTN. I don't think there's anything off the top of my head. I mean, people who already know who I am have heard this story before. They see what I put out on Instagram. I feel like I'm fairly good at being the same person on social media as I am off. So I tell all of my clients this, and anybody listening, I'm always just one message away. If you have questions, concerns, I know coaching itself is a luxury, and it's not accessible to every single person, but I try to be. So if you have questions, concerns, just want to chit chat, you can always reach me on social media. I think my handle is @Coach John Noel, but I'm always around.
And you have an awesome new podcast. So if you enjoyed listening to John chat, you can listen to him chat some more with real life people. It's called The Nuance, right?
Yep, you could actually be on. I do just have guests that fill out a brief inquiry form and come on, and we chat about what you're struggling with, what you're trying to accomplish, and I do my best to, in a realistic way, give some actionable, tangible takeaways. So I have a form for that on my Instagram. You can fill that out. But yeah, that's on Spotify and Apple, just like this one.
Cool. All right. We will link
Awesome.
all of that for you guys in the show notes for easy access. But thanks for joining us,
Thanks
John.
for having me.
Of course. One more time, John, where can they find you?
Instagram @Coach John Noel, and on Spotify or Apple Podcast, The Nuance.
What about YouTube?
I'm
The
Alessandra
Nuance is
Skutnik.
also on YouTube.
@Joelle Samantha.
I'm @Josh Skutnik.
Everything else you guys need is linked in the show notes.